So, as we just heard, a senior North Korean diplomat gave a rare address at the United Nations and said the North will never give up its nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba will be visiting South Korea today for his final trip before he steps down. For more on this, we're joined today by Dr. Joel Atkinson, professor at the Graduate School of International and Area Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Dr. Atkinson, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, good morning. It's nice to be with you.
So this was the first time in 7 years that North Korea sent their senior official to deliver a speech at the United Nations in New York. What's your take on his UN speech?
Yeah, well, as a vice foreign minister, Kim Song-kyung is, relatively low level. For example, the president delivered South Korea's speech, but still, as you said, this is a significant shift. I think the speech does two main things. The first is list the concessions that Pyongyang wants the US to make, recognition of its nuclear status, the end of military exercises with South Korea, and ultimately the end of the Korea-US alliance. And second, I think it opens the door for a kind of a reconciliation between North Korea and an increasingly China-centered United Nations. The speech recognizes the value of the UN and this kind of idea that it can do better in the future, presumably starting with how it operates in relation to North Korea's nuclear weapons.
You see, and while a North Korean diplomat is in New York, just recently North Korean and Chinese foreign ministers, they met in Beijing. Could this signal a possible resumption of dialogue between North Korea and the United States?
Well, obviously at some point they will talk, whether it's during the Trump administration or 10 years from now. So it really depends on how high of a bar each side will set in order to resume public dialogue. What Pyongyang is doing is building solidarity with China and Russia, with its friends at the UN, in order to pressure the US to make those concessions. That means Pyongyang is setting a high bar for the US to jump. Will Trump be willing to clear that bar, or will Kim be willing to lower it if Trump isn't? Well, we'll see.
Right, and President Lee Jae-myung will be meeting Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba today. This is their first time in more than two decades that the leaders of South Korea and Japan, they're holding a meeting in South Korea outside of Seoul. This will be Ishiba's last visit to Korea as Prime Minister before stepping down. What does this tell us about today's summit?
Yeah, well, I think selecting Busan reflects Lee Jae-myung's efforts at what is called, regional revitalization. And yes, even though he only became prime minister in October last year, Ishiba will not be in that role for much longer. So I would point to two things regarding the summit. One is they see signaling cooperation as important to create some diplomatic leverage, not only with US President Trump, but also with China and North Korea. And they want to cooperate economically to create some scale relative to those giants, China and the US. And second is this general perception that cooperation is going to be more difficult under the next Japanese PM. Ishiba wants to reciprocate Lee's August visit to Tokyo while he can, and I think both probably hope to lock in some of that cooperation that little bit more.
Let's see, what might be some of the issues that might be discussed when they meet in Busan today?
Well, they'll certainly be promoting what's called a future-oriented relationship. That means each side being a bit softer on historical issues. So far, both sides have been willing to do that to an extent. After the first summit, President Lee told journalists that it was just the first spoonful, and you shouldn't expect to be full after having a first bite, or you'll end up with indigestion. So now this is a chance for another bite, but it's unlikely that Ishiba will be able to offer too much, lest it provoke a backlash in Japan and set back that momentum. I expect President Lee will ask for support for his efforts to encourage Washington to talk to Pyongyang, and I expect Ishiba may want the South Korean side to re-emphasize that it won't be leaning in China's favor at the expense of Japan and the US over Taiwan and so on.
Right, and the next major diplomatic gathering will be the APEC leaders meeting here in Gyeongju with both Donald Trump and Xi Jinping expected to attend the event. What's your take on the possibility of a meeting here in South Korea between the leaders of the world's two largest economies?
Well, if they both come, they will presumably meet. I think we shouldn't read too much into it since they will be here for APEC, not to meet with each other. I think a bigger sign would be Trump going to Beijing. And I think, it's very hard to tell what's going on behind the scenes, but there's some signs they may be getting closer to some kind of deal on tariffs, etc. We won't know until we find out. And overall, the background, I think, is a kind of an increasing tension and conflict between China and the United States. So whatever happens here in Gyeongju is not, I don't think, is going to really get us into some different trajectory.
I see. All right, Dr. Atkinson, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. My pleasure.